Hello. Can everyone hear me? Everyone hear me all right? Brilliant. Well, we'll get started straight away, otherwise we'll be hosing the guy that's next or the girl. So, I'll introduce myself in a second. We'll just run through sort of a scope of what I'll actually be covering, and then those of you that don't want to be here can exit at that point. Now, I think the people that would be, well, at least interested, maybe have raised eyebrows about this whole thing, are probably next door listening to the CP chat anyway. So first of all, the talk is called High Performance Displays. Now, I'm not necessarily majoring on canopies. I know a lot of people hear high performance, they think canopies, VFS, acro wingsuiting, for example. I'm not really covering that. What I'm talking about is high performance in the fact that an individual is put under immense pressure to land in a small arena relative to everything else around it. That requires high performance from the individual. We will touch on canopy piloting, and yes, you can see we'll talk about Lords, which everyone got upset about. But also, the Red Devils, despite the outward appearance, we're very humble. We look for interaction with the wider community. You guys have a lot more experience in certain things than we do. So follow us on the social media down below, send us questions, and engage with us, and we'll get back to you maybe with questions, or even if you're looking for advice. So me then, that's me in the middle right, Captain Dan Lovegrove, still in the Army. I joined the Army Reserves in 2011. I commissioned in the Reserves into the infantry. I then went to the regular commissioning course at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst in 2014, passed out in 2015 and went to the Parachute Regiment after my P Company. I went to 2 Para as a platoon commander, and it was at that point, about 12 months in, I had to have surgery for an injury that I had acquired during training. However, if I'd got surgery then, I would have been pushed back months, maybe years. So I decided to wait till I got to battalion, had the surgery, and I got pushed into a role called the battalion training officer. So you're running the training of, between 300 and 600 people at any one point. It's that point that qualifies me to be stood in front of you, because I've learned a lot there about managing risk, mitigating risk, planning training, planning events, and that's really why I'm here. If you were to look at my skydiving career, so I joined the Red Devils in January 2018. I was AFF'd January 2019 I joined the Red Devils. I was AFF'd in October 2018, so I've only got just over 200 jumps. So I'm not here to tell you guys how to fly a canopy. I don't have either the credibility or the experience or knowledge. What I do have a lot of knowledge in, 9 years nearly being around it, is how the Army manage risk, and fundamentally we're a military team, so that's important. One thing though, before you do write me off, 200 jumps in the Red Devils is slightly different to 200 jumps as a sports jumper. Yes, you may have 1,000 jumps, maybe thousands and thousands of jumps, but not every jump is created equal. 1,000 jumps in one location onto one drop zone with the winds variable from 2 directions will not give you more skills, more challenges, and more tests than jumping thousands of times into demo arenas that are 100 by 50 meters in the center of London, center of Manchester. You gain more experience, you gain more knowledge. Not every jump is created equal. What this is not. It's an explanation of how we do business. It's a deep dive into the Lords cricket display. And it's an opportunity for you guys to ask questions regarding all parachute display teams in the Army. There's 4. What this is not, it's not a canopy handling seminar. You're in the wrong one if you think it is. It's definitely not a recruiting pitch, and it's certainly not a promotion of our brand, because you're not the right people to be promoting to. Skydiving community, whilst amazing and fluid, is very small. We need to be much wider than that when we look at reach. So this is our team film this year, if it plays. So that's like a roundup of last year, what we did, what we achieved. And you know, really points to note from that, obviously apart from the Lords canopy piloting thing, and we do all disciplines going. We'll try everything. We are employed to do everything and at least make sure that we've got the skills to put that into a demo. They very rarely are required, so you're not going to be doing VFS on a demo, but certainly we will do every facet of skydiving to make sure we have the experience and the knowledge in sort of broad areas. Also, point to note, there's only 14 of us, and it's amazing what 14 people on one laptop can churn out in terms of editorial videos. So, the reason I put this person up, of the 14 individuals on the team, 13 are paratroopers, and I think this is actually quite crucial into what makes the team what it is. So, I'm going to read you a quote now called "What manner of men are these that wear the maroon beret?" So, firstly, they're all volunteers, and they're toughened by physical hardship. As a result, they have an infectious optimism and an offensive eagerness that comes from physical well-being. They have jumped from the air, and by doing so, they have conquered their fear. Their duty lies in the van of battle. They are proud of this honour. They have the highest standards in all things, whether it be the skills on the battlefield or smartness in the execution of their peacetime duties. They are, in fact, every man an emperor. So why do I raise this? Basically, this tells you that you are dealing with a very specific type of person when you look at the Red Devils as a team, as a skydiving team. It's not, you know, some of the civilian teams out there, you've got a very specific character that joins the Red Devils. They're robust, they're physically well trained, they're fit, they are robust, they are willing to take on something some civilians might consider more risky because fundamentally they're not scared. I raised that picture here because we are all trained to jump static line at 600 feet with up to 70 kilos of kit with a front-mounted reserve. The jumping out the door does not faze us whatsoever. So that's the person that makes up the team, and I think that's important sort of as a thread to take through this whole thing when you're talking about risk versus reward. Something you might consider as risk to you, we might not necessarily think that. So a little bit of history. I think anyone that sat in on Jackie's chat will know, but we were started in 1964 by Lieutenant Colonel Ed Gardner. We then became the official display team in 1979, and we were tasked then, very similarly now, to engage with the community in the UK and abroad on behalf of the Ministry of Defence. At that point, they were sort of in the 70s and 80s, 40, 50 people strong. They were doing hundreds of displays a year, hundreds of descents, and they were obviously using old school kit, rounds, doing sort of the older disciplines. 55 years later, if that comes up, we're a totally different beast. There's only 14 of us. The selection criteria for the team has changed. You must have done 2 years at battalion as a para before you can come onto the team. You must have done 1 overseas airborne exercise to demonstrate that you will exit the plane into the unknown. You have to be licensed before you join the team, even if it's just an A license. We'll take you if we think you've got the ability to grow, so we look at your ability to pick things up and how quickly you learn. You spend 12 months on the ground, regardless of who you are, unless there are very exceptional circumstances. Those of you that know him, Alexis McNaughton came to the team with over 3,000 jumps. He was going to the Canopy Piloting World Championships. It would be silly to keep that person on the ground for 12 months. He did do a period of time on the ground because he needed to understand the format of a demo from the ground before we put him in the sky. You have to have 200 jumps to attempt demo selection. And of demo selection or team training, it's the first 3 weeks of our team training, you'll probably do between 90 and 120 jumps, depending on aircraft availability, weather and such. We would expect of those jumps, all of them, to be within 5 meters of the cross, unless there's exceptional circumstances, i.e. you're splitting the arena for someone else coming at the same time, you are landing safely, so you've decided to go in front of the cross, behind the cross. If you justify why you've done it that way, then it's acceptable, but on the whole, we're looking for 100 out of 100. So it takes a lot of skill, I suppose, but there's people in the room that will be able to do that. And one thing I will say about the Red Devils now, we're incredibly grateful for the job we do. We jump all over the world, we conduct 50 to 100 displays a year, we do 500 tandems. We know we're lucky. We're being paid by the Army to do this job, we're representing the Army, the brand, and whether some of you like it or not, we are representing British skydiving when we go abroad. But I'll come on to that. So this is our mission. It's to attract. So it's conduct engagement in order to attract suitable individuals for recruitment, impact individuals, groups or organisations, and enhance the British Army reputation and branding. So the attract part of that is to draw people to the Army that might not otherwise will. So we have to do that by demonstrating professionalism, discipline, something exciting. Impact, yes, this means about influencing people, whether that's MOD, appointed VIPs, strategic influence of leaders of different nations. But in the UK, what we're sort of aiming for is we want people that come to our displays to walk away with a positive attitude towards the Army. And finally there, to enhance the Army's reputation and branding, that's demonstrated by professionalism, discipline, skill, the ability to do things other teams will not take on. One thing I can't put on the board, but I will mention here, is we do have an operational effect. We do contribute to the operational effectiveness of the Army through training certain individuals. But come and chat to us if you want to learn more about that. So this is getting into the meat and the bones, and this is teeing you up for the chat we're going to have about Lords. What is the policy? Where do we sit? Who do we sit under? What regulations do we follow? This isn't by any means exhaustive. There is a huge list of things that we have to comply with. This is just the key ones. First and foremost, we abide by the rules and regulations set out by the British Skydiving, or previously the BPA, British Skydiving now. So their ops manual, we abide by the rules and regulations, fundamentally from our point of view, because there's no comparable qualifications in the military. Being a CP coach, there's no comparable qualification in the military, and therefore we wouldn't be able to carry it out unless we made a qualification, and that just takes too much red tape and too much time. So we operate under the under British Skydiving's ops manual. And this bit might sound a little controversial to some people in the room, but actually we don't need to. We would still be able to carry out demonstrations all over the UK if we did not operate under the British Skydiving Manual. We have absolutely no thoughts about doing that, and we like our relationship with British Skydiving. We would never do that, and we respect the organisation too much. But if the MOD decided they could stop that and basically set up qualifications in the Army, and we would operate under the Military Aviation Authority rather than the CAA. The next one down there, that's our keynote policy really, the Army Parachute Display Team's Ops Manual. What you need to think, the way you need to think of that is essentially take the section 14 or whatever it was of the BPA displays, make everything more restrictive, make it more difficult to carry out a display, and that's that document up there. Very exhaustive. It goes into the depth of how many jumps you require to jump certain flags, depending on size, who can JM on certain events. But just think of it as much more restrictive because the Army is mitigating risk by training us to a higher standard. The Army Parachute Display Team, AGI, Army General Administrative Instruction. That's more a statement of intent, broad brush stuff. It doesn't dive into the specifics of what you're required to do certain things. Then there's what we call our SOP, Standard Operating Procedures. Now this is all of the above, plus common sense, written down in a codified document held by us. So for an example, if you were to go by the British Skydiving Manual and the Army Parachute Display Team Manual, you could display qualify on a Triathlon 175, and then in your spare time, you could jump a Sabre 135. Now, Red Devils SOPs, you cannot do that. Our opinion on it is they're two completely different canopies. You have a different sight picture when you land. It's dangerous, and therefore we don't let you do it. So if you display qualify, on the Red Devils, or you carry out team training on a certain canopy, that is the only canopy you are able to use for the rest of the year until the following team training. If you wish to jump in your own time, you must have the same canopy on. Not necessarily the Army's canopy, but the same. So you'd have to buy yourself a Triathlon 175. AXO 3216, this is the Army's health and safety document. We'll pull big bits of this out later on. Military duty holding status. This essentially means duty of care. Who holds and who owns the duty of care? Commanders, so the officers in the Army, have a responsibility to ensure that their soldiers' welfare is being looked after and the risk is being mitigated to a point that it is safe for that individual to carry out the activity. So in terms of the order of the duty of care, who holds the duty of care, initially, first line is the team leader. So our team leader's 5,000 jumps, 1,000 displays, very experienced guy. He's been doing Red Devils jumps for 10 years. He's been on the team 10 years. He knows what he's doing. He holds the initial risk. You then go up to the OC. The TL transfers, and I'll get onto the 5 Ts, he transfers most of his risk to the OC. Fundamentally, if something goes wrong, I will be in the dock and I'll be the one that's justifying it. Above that, you have the delivery duty holder. Now, this can be a NATO rank officer level 5. Don't worry too much about that. Essentially, it's my boss. He breathes down my neck to make sure that I'm doing the things I should be. He then checks all our paperwork and our homework and makes sure it's happening. Above him, you have the operating duty holder. This is a 1-star, so someone that's been around it for a long time, knows about managing risk, been in the Army 15 plus years, he's a brigadier. It's his job to ensure that the teams, or whoever he's in charge of, is promoting a safe culture and carrying out assurance through a health and safety advisor to make sure that's happening. And then the senior duty holder, we never get to that level, but it's the Chief of General Staff, head of the Army, his brand. If something goes wrong, it's his fault. Right, this is the bit I think people are interested in. This is a rough process of how we carry out a display. We'll get an event inquiry. We'll then go out, do a virtual recce. We'll conduct a physical recce, carry out a plan, brief the plan. We have to submit what's called an APDT booking form. We'll do risk assessments that are significant. Ours is 54 pages long as the general. You then have to go into every display separately, which adds on about 10 pages, so 64 pages roughly per display. We then get duty holder approval where required, carry out some pre-display actions, and then we execute the display. There is post-activity, but we won't talk about that. That's not linear. A lot of it happens concurrently. There'll be the booking forms happening at the same time as the recce. It kind of molds together, but it's a handy handrail. So we get a phone call from a company called Red Sky Entertainment we worked with before. And they basically say, look, can you do the Cricket World Cup final in 2019? Can you deliver the ball to the Cricket World Cup final? It's going to be televised to up to 3 billion people live. You have a 5-minute slot to get the ball down onto the nursery ground, get it into the stadium. Can you do it? Now, the reward is huge. Do we attract? Yes, it's a massive audience. People watching that will then think about the Army after. Are we impacting anyone? Yeah, again, huge audience. We're spreading the word of the Army, and people are going to think positively because we're landing the cricket ball for the final. Are we enhancing the reputation of the team, the Army, British skydiving? Absolutely, because it is not an easy task. So the output's enormous. So for us, straight away, when we got that phone call, we need to make this work. So, event inquiry, done, covered that. This then is what we're looking at. This is Lords. I don't think I've got a laser, but top half is the pitch, bottom half is the practice area, or the nursery ground as they call it. And then we have to carry out the next function down, which is the recce. We get told over the phone we're landing in the nursery ground, so we know that's the space we're going to hit. What can we start doing? Immediately, phone's down, what can we start doing straight away? Virtual recce, Google Earth. Get on it, get pictures online, have a look what's going on. Find out about aircraft restrictions. Are there any no-fly zones? Is it on flight paths? That's going to influence altitude, time. Can we jump at all? Aircraft availability. So over London, you need a twin engine. And then finally, we go out on a physical recce. What do we immediately know? There is airspace restrictions. So we can only get 2,500 feet for this display. We have a time window imposed on us by millions of pounds worth of advertising. We know where the nearest hospital is from the virtual recce. We know the air ambulance is probably on standby for that event. We know that there's going to be very good security, so it's going to be fenced off more than likely. We also know and assume that the roads will be closed around it for easy access for that security, i.e. the police. And there's going to be a great first response because you're going to have paramedics in the ground. However, that could all change, but that's our assumptions immediately from a virtual recce. So this was the virtual recce we did, all very similar, it's replicated now. What we can see from that image, you've got 3 very clear land-off areas. First one there, Regent's Park. Second one, smaller, but you'll notice it's still almost double the size of the actual landing area. And that area there, of the closed roads, actually very, very big once you zoom in. It's very wide. It's sort of 60 metres wide in some parts and around the roundabout, which is completely flat. You know, it's huge. You could almost land in there for a demo. You wouldn't. It's too high risk, but you could. We then look at, we overlay our degrees and have a look and see what we'll be dealing with straight away. So we can see there, if we have wind coming out of 360 degrees, we'll be landing into wind. We always do a left-handed pattern. It's just our SOPs. It means everyone knows they're going left. You don't have crossover in the sky. You just follow each other in. So just for now, everyone, we land left. If we're flying into wind at 360 degrees, we know it's going to be a pretty easy landing pattern because we're going corner to corner down the arena. We've got a nice long distance there. If it's coming out of 180, similarly, pretty easy. There's no high obstacles there that we can see from that recce or that image. 90 degrees will be slightly harder because I don't know if you can see it, but you've got in the top left corner, so the northwest corner, you have a tree. We don't know the height of the tree, but that might make it more difficult. Is it encroaching on the downwind crowd line? That could be more difficult. 270 degrees, yeah, again, easy, corner to corner. The difficulty then comes, so 315 or 135, that's up the length of the arena, nice and simple. The difficulty comes is if you have a crosswind on the arena. We will never land the width of the arena because it's only 50 metres. We will always do corner to corner, but if it's coming out of either of those 2 directions, it's quite a substantial crosswind. Then we go on a physical recce. We get as high up as we can. And we take some photos, we get the trundle wheel out, measure the landing area. We speak to the people that were there, groundsman, the event organiser, work out what obstacles are going to be on the landing area, if any. So what we find out, it's 100 metres by 60 metres. There's going to be some stuff on the nursery ground not encroaching on the actual arena. Actually, those trees on the northeast side are quite high. They're about 90 feet. This tree down in the northwest corner is only about 30, 40 feet high. Not a huge problem. And it's nowhere near the downwind crowd line anyway, so it's not an issue. We know the height of the house, it's 20 to 25 feet, maybe a bit more. So we're starting to make some assumptions already. Right, so what do we find out? The main pitch has got spider cams all over it, so we can't land on that. The public will be filling up this area. That will be absolutely full of people, so there's no chance you can land off there. There's going to be marquees there, cricket nets there. We know the length of the arena is 100 metres exactly because the path was actually part of the arena because the fence was set back from it. 60 metres wide. And we know the land-offs are difficult. So what do we start doing immediately before we've even thought about planning the display? we start mitigating risk by saying, right, this is hard. It's in the centre of London, it's difficult. We're going to put a jump limit on this. Anyone with less than 75 displays, you're not going. We're not going to take flags. Too much risk. We're going to limit ancillaries to 3 people, so only 3 people can carry a camera and smoke. They're the most experienced jumpers on the team, so we have the TL, the team leader, the jump master, and the cameraman. Both have got, all 3 have got over 8 seasons in the team, 8 seasons as a display jumper. That's mitigating risk. So overall, we only had 7 jumpers available for this. We then look again at the pictures. They're obviously here doing this at this point, so just go with me. If the winds are coming out of 360 degrees, that is ideal. It's a corner-to-corner landing. There's no one over in that corner because it's closed off. There's a nice big gap between the tree and the building. You're not going to come in between that anyway. You'll be above it at that stage, but that would be ideal. Again, 90, not a problem. No one over in that corner. That building's only 20 foot high. You're going to be far above that before you even come into land. 270, winds coming out of 270, you might have a bit more difficulty because that tree, but actually you're going to be flying inside it, so it's not a problem. We can see the different heights of the obstacles. The media centre is 100 feet, you don't want to be going anywhere near that, but fundamentally the biggest thing that comes out of this is you're going to have a lot of turbulence going into land. There's going to be a lot of curl over from the buildings, especially if the winds are high. So this is the bit that I think a lot of people sat in here for. Lee, Lance Corporal Crudgington, Lee, he swooped between a building and a tree and came into land, into the arena. It was not something he thought of doing whilst in the sky under canopy. He went there 4 times, measured between the buildings. We set that lane up on camp. He then swooped it several times, rehearsed it, practiced. He's already got thousands of high-performance landings, but we'll go on to all of this. But this is the recce he produced. Well, he did it in writing and I had to produce it, so actually the heights on lane 1 are wrong, but we'll go through that. So lane 1, there is turn heights. He can do a 450, no lower than 1,250 feet, I should say. He will do a 270 if he's no lower than 1,000 feet, and he will do a 90 if he's no lower than 500 feet. So if he has any malfunction, any problem getting to his holding area, he knows his heights. He also knows his lanes, where he's going to swoop. Lane 1, suitable if winds are coming out of 315 degrees to 40 degrees. Slight crosswinder, but suitable. Lane 2, he's taken photos of the building. He knows they aren't occupied, because they're occupied by the groundsmen who are going to be out doing work. He knows his heights. He knows that this is suitable for anything coming out of 45 to 225 degrees wind-wise. And lane 3, this is his optimal lane. He's not flying over the heads of any audience members. It covers the largest area. So anything coming out of 225 degrees to 360 degrees, that's what his lane. This is what he produced. So you can see already, this was planned. It wasn't something he got out, threw up, and then decided, actually, I'll swoop that. We would not allow that to happen. We're in the military. They're the degrees that he thought about. Right, so recce and plan is done. The Army Parachute Display Team booking form is something we have to submit to our financial commanders, budget holders, because we're using public money to purchase aircraft, train, purchase kit. It has to be justified. Is this justifiable? So we fill in the reasons why it is. It then comes back as approved. Risk assessments. The risk assessment we carried out for Lords, this was one of them. This is the British Skydiving's risk assessment. It's okay. It's simple to use. But as you could see, it's not very extensive. I'm not pointing the finger, but certainly for some displays on, say, Netheravon, perfectly fine. The Army do things slightly differently. We have 5 T's that we have to hit to manage risk. Now, AXO says control risk. My opinion is we cannot control risk. You have to manage it. The AXO is written by General Staff. I don't have a say when it comes to that, but I think you can manage risk. So you can treat it, take it, tolerate it, terminate it, or transfer it. In layman's terms, you can mitigate against it, you can take the risk anyway, you can just accept that there is residual risk, terminate the activity completely if it's too risky, or transfer the risk up that duty holding chain to someone who can make a more informed decision because they've been around the processes longer. Just as a sort of side note, we actually cancel about 25% of our display inquiries annually due to termination of risk. We're not willing to take the risk. The reward isn't high enough, there's too much risk, whatever it may be. 25% we cancel. This is again taken from the AXO. You have to follow the process, step 1 to 5. We'll then talk about the risk escalation matrix. So the process then, step 1, very simply, what can go wrong skydiving? More importantly, what can go wrong as a display jumper? Step 2, we're talking about obstacles and people. Step 3, we're talking about managing the risk. Step 4, record that, make sure it's documented and briefed. And then step 5, always carry out dynamic risk assessments. A dynamic risk assessment could be something you're doing under canopy, looking at obstacles on the ground. And then this escalation matrix, so you give a number, 1 to 5, on the impact of something. You then give a number on 1 to 5 of the likelihood it happening. As an example, a low impact accident or incident and a low likelihood will be getting your hair caught in a car door. Very, very unlikely to happen. Very rare that that would happen. The impact of that, as you'll see there, 1 on the severity scale, you're probably not going to need first aid. The other end of the scale, high impact, high likelihood. High probability of something going wrong if you're conducting a military static line jump from 200 feet, 250 feet with no reserve. Now that's actually something that the paras are trained to do. We never do it, but operationally we might do it. Extremely high likelihood something's going to go wrong. The impact is going to be multiple fatalities or life-changing injuries. So once you decide where on the scale you are, anything in green can be signed off by the risk holder at the lowest level. Anything in yellow, you have to go up to the operating duty holder. Anything in red then needs to go to the senior duty holder. So this is what we spoke about then. This is what we talked about. There's lots of things on our risk assessment, so which include getting there in a car, in planing, transit flights. But really what you guys want to hear about is lee swoop. How did we manage the risk on lee swoop? So I'll just drag out some key things here. Canopy malfunction. I rated it as a 3. It's possible, which is 3. Is the impact that high? No, because you've got a reserve and he knows his emergency drills. So it's a 1 on the impact scale. Therefore, it goes down to 3. I've treated the risk because I know that reserves are packed by advanced packers. They're qualified to pack reserves. I also know that the kit is inspected more regularly than it is through British Skydiving. The riggers in my team will have to inspect it more often due to the policy we sit under in the Army. We're using industry standard kit, very good reserves, so on and so on. So I've treated the risk. I've got it down to a 3. I'm going to tolerate the risk. Malfunction of the reserve. Very, very unlikely this would happen. So it's a remote or rare thing that might happen. So it's a 1. But if it does go wrong and you're attempting to ride the reserve, then the impact of that is going to be probably a single fatality or at least life-changing injuries. So the other problem is if you're over a big audience, which we were planned to be, there might be multiple fatalities or life-changing injuries. So I rated it as a 5. So as you can see, very rare likelihood, very high impact. So it's up in a 5. How am I going to deal with this? Right, well, I've treated it advanced packers again. He's got an AED. We do flight line checks. We know that Lee's experienced and very, very experienced jumper, so he knows his emergency drills. He's also an AFF instructor, so he knows how to teach those emergency drills. And as a result of getting all that down as low as I can in terms of risk, I'm going to tolerate that risk. Another risk we thought about, again, this list isn't extensive, AAD failure, extremely unlikely. But again, it's good. Multiple fatalities or life-changing injuries. The impact is high, likelihood is low. It's a 5. I've treated it by all the things I've spoken about before, flight line checks, inspections, well-trained individuals, experienced individuals. So therefore, I'm going to tolerate that risk. Ancillary equipment failure. This is smoke or camera because he didn't have flags or anything else. It's possible. So it's a 3. It could happen. Snags on camera brackets and so on. Smoke doesn't, it very rarely goes wrong, but it could. And if it did, the impact of that would be possibly life-changing injuries. He's not going to die from it, thankfully. But so it goes up to a 9. Again, something I can treat and tolerate myself. So all of our ancillaries are checked regularly and inspected in line with policy. The smoke bracket has a cutaway design, which means it will hang below you on a fire retardant bridle. We do flight line checks on all ancillaries before we get on the plane. We then check again before we exit the plane. Lee's extremely experienced. He's done this several times before. So I'm going to tolerate that risk. Landing off is another risk we considered. It's very unlikely due to his training and experience, so I'm going to say it's a 2 in terms of likelihood, but the impact is possibly quite high and it is going to change his life. So it's probably an 8 because the land-offs aren't amazing, and actually if he goes the wrong direction or he gets caught upwind, downwind, there isn't a lot that he can aim for. So he might be hitting something, which means the impact will be high. How am I going to treat this? He's done so many demos, and we've put a demo limit on it. He's experienced, he's done a lot of training and rehearsal for this jump. He knows the plan inside out and backwards. He knows if something goes wrong, where to aim. So I'm going to tolerate the risk. Collision with an obstacle. This is the one that people got upset about and think we didn't think about and think that Lee was a cowboy and just got out and went for the swoop. It's unlikely that Lee's going to hit anything. He's done this so many times before. He's got 2,500 high-performance descents. He went and represented Great Britain at the Canopy Piloting World Championships this year. We set up the lane on camp. He practiced with the same obstacle heights, same swoop gate. We've rehearsed the plan. He knows the plan. He's visited this site 4 times, visualised himself doing it. The Army Parachute Display Team POM, the Parachute Ops Manual, stipulates he must have 1,000 high-performance displays to carry that out, tick. He must have CP2, tick. He's done an extensive recce. He decided on a lower performance canopy than the ones he does own or the team owns. So he's treated the risk, and I'm happy to tolerate that risk because I know the individual, I know his skill level. So yes, while the impact would be extremely high, he's likely going to lose his life if he collides with an obstacle. The likelihood of that happening is low. And the last 2, collision with a spectator on the swoop. I know it's not going to happen. My guys will bury themselves before they hit someone in the audience. However, if they did, it would be a very high impact on, firstly, those 2 individuals or more, and also on the Army's brand, reputation, our brand. So it is a high impact. However, it's not going to happen because he would rather divert his course and go somewhere else. Okay, so we've done a risk assessment. Again, not extensive, just dragging out the key points. You get financial approval because of the size of the output and the audience reach we'll have. Duty holder is notified, out of courtesy really more than anything else, because I own the risk so far. I haven't had to elevate anything to him. And we carry out our pre-display actions. That's the rehearsing. The guys are the way we do business is we train for different display formats throughout the year. At the beginning of the year on team training, specific events that require specific skills or a specific format that we've not practiced in depth, we'll go and rehearse. So actually the day or 2 or 3 days before this jump, we went and rehearsed this jump, start to finish, brief all the way through to execution. The ground crew were there with radios. The whole thing was set up exactly as it would be on the day. People were asked to brief the plan to everyone else even though they weren't writing the plan. You would get a display jumper up to come and tell everyone else what the plan was to make sure everyone knew what was going on, how we're going to do it, what measures were in place to mitigate against risk, and again, rehearse. Did our pre-display actions. And this is what actually happened. So on the 14th of July 2019, 4 ground crew left Netheravon at 05:45. We went directly to Lords Cricket Ground. We got stopped at pretty much every single checkpoint, but managed to get our way through, talked our way through, and we got to the event at 08:15. The place was packed, couldn't move. 0800, 7 Red Devils, so call sign Red Devils, got to Netheravon and they talked through the plan in extreme detail, going through actions on if this happens, what am I going to do? If this happens, what am I going to do? If I get out deep, short, if I have a malfunction, if my reserve doesn't, what am I going to do? Go through it all. They then emplaned at 9:20 onto a Skyvan, set off. The winds were coming out 45 degrees at this point, which, as we looked at earlier, was the worst possible case for us. Still manageable, but it means they're going to get a naughty crosswinder. They got overhead early, they circled, the cloud was building, so they had to drop down to 1,900 feet and could still see the DZ clearly. They exited the plane at 10:12 from around 1,800 to 1,900 feet. The ground smoke indicated the wind was coming out of approximately 60 degrees at this stage. So Lee, who was the jump master at the time, decided, right, 60 degrees, what's that bracket? Lane 2, I'm going to swoop down lane 2. He knew his heights. He decided, actually, he got out probably a bit short, took too long getting to his holding area, hit that 500 feet limit for a 90-degree turn. He was only allowed to do a 90 at that point because that was his height. All planned, good to go. And the jump was seen by 2.5 billion people on telly live. The attendance figures were 87,000 people live, and our media company that sponsor us and they do our media analytics, they had a server crash because of the amount of social media that was going on, including us. And this is how it happened. Very much. So key takeaways. Firstly, the Red Devils plan every display down to the nth degree, far more than anyone else will be privy to. I can't release things like risk assessments because they're official sensitive, but please come and find me after and I'll take you through all 64 pages of it. I know because I sat through an inquiry after the social media outburst. But in terms of you guys, what can you take away? You can use the 5 T's to mitigate risk in anything you do. Whether you're setting up a VFS team in the tunnel, you can use the 5 T's to decide what you do want to do, what you don't want to do. You must take time and effort to fully do a recce, a reconnaissance, or gather information before you carry out the activity. Whether that is setting up a crew camp on your drop zone, or deciding you're going to learn to swoop, or even if you're a very experienced swooper, You must spend the time walking the ground, understanding the possible conditions you'll be facing in order that you can plan actions appropriately that will get you out of troublesome situations. Risk versus reward. If the reward is not worth it, don't do it. We're not in a sport where you can take a risk that's not worth something. Plan it in depth, go over it again, tell your plan to someone, brief the plan, get them to brief it back to you to make sure that the plan is sound, rehearse it over and over again, and then get out there and execute it properly. So I guess finally what I'd like to say is, yes, this did cause a bit of a social media stir. We've moved on in the times, and things like swooping a gate is acceptable, and we fully understood the risks. The individual understood, I understood, my boss understood, his boss understood. We were willing to take that risk because we treated it by his experience, the training we did before, the rehearsals, the plans we made, and the reward at the end. So a big thank you to British Skydiving for having me down so you guys can be bored senseless about health and safety. Also take this opportunity to thank all of our sponsors. We couldn't do what we do without you. All the manufacturers in the room, DZs, pilots, you're all our friends and you've dug us out of all sorts of situations. And of course the community as a whole. We go out there, we represent you. You might not want us to, but we do, unfortunately. But we are part of the community, so come and ask for help, to come down and look at our rigging room, see how we're doing business. Just get involved. We can, obviously help out with crew and stuff like that. But thank you very much for listening. I'll now sort of open up to questions. As I say, I'm a sea license jumper. I can give you the Army policy or the instruction, but I won't necessarily be able to give you good experience. But please, if anyone's got anything to ask or add or think we've done things wrong or different, let us know. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure.
With all these risks, the risk control, do you have any accident to report so far?
So the Red Devils have had accidents over the years, yes. Very, very few, might I add. Certainly no major significant ones on displays, bar one, which probably stands out in everyone's memory, which is the time we had a guest jumper from 7 RHA joined the team, so 7 Royal Horse Artillery, para, joined the team and landed on the roof of Burnley Football Stadium. That was, I think, 10 years ago, maybe more, maybe less. But from then on, no one except paratroopers are allowed to train with us or join us unless there's very exceptional circumstances and you have a gold medal winning skydiver here, so we trust her to do the business. Thank you though, and yeah, clear, we do take on risk, but I take you back to the individuals you're dealing with. We're all soldiers first and foremost. We've gone through a lot to get to where we are. We've seen risk, we understand it, and we're willing to take it without hesitation, which I think helps a lot when you're doing things like that. Any others? Lots now. Yeah.
So you turn down 25% of all your displays. What's your typical reason for looking at a display and going, no, we're not going to do that?
Things might be altitude. Obviously, we've got a hard limit on our altitude. We won't go any lower than 1,700 feet. Typically, we won't go any lower than 2,000 unless there's a big reason. It might be arena location, not enough land-offs, too close to an obstacle that's, if you've got a 150-foot tree right on the downwind crowd line or a potential downwind crowd line, and we don't want to go near it, we'll just say no, sorry. Or the reward isn't good enough. If we were doing that display into Lords and there's only going to be 15,000 people coming and it was a local TV show only, you probably wouldn't have taken it.
Dan, thanks for the presentation, brilliant. What I will say is the Red Devils this year absolutely smashed out of the park, without a shadow of a doubt.
Thank you very much.
Well done to all of you. My question being, and we know each other very well, is do you feel that the military hold you back in the fact that you're restricted by what they tell you can and cannot do? And do you believe that you could do more if you hadn't had them restrictions in place?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Definitely. The military put so much red tape up, you would not believe. Fighting to do that was outrageous, trying to get that through the planning process. The military is very risk averse, whether we like it or not. We're not on operations. There's no need to be hurting our individuals. And we're in a position now where people that hold that duty of care are potentially more sensible. They've grown up in the military with a bad duty of care and they're trying to improve that. So the military is very risk averse and they put up a lot of red tape to stop us doing things. That's all of the Army parachute display teams. They could do a lot more. Certainly some of the other teams have got the skill to be doing more than they're allowed to. And it's the same with us. But yeah, definitely, the military make it very difficult, far, far harder than British skydiving do, to do the things we do.
It's just a quick question. You went through to execute, but when do you guys get the opportunity to sit down around a table to a tabletop exercise for the feedback, the debrief?
So every Tuesday after a display weekend is debrief. So we'll all sit round in the team room, get the projector out, we'll look at an aerial shot of the drop zone, and we'll talk through exactly what happened. We'll start off with the jump master, giving an overview of how the jump went, who did what. We'll get up video footage to back up some of those things. He'll talk to the camera team to get the video in that he needs in the presentation. We'll speak to the ground crew commander, so DZ safety officer. He'll then speak or she'll then speak. The stack pilot will talk about the crew, then the team leader will sum it all up and we'll go away with what we need to improve, what we need to practice that week, because if something went wrong, we'd get out on a Wednesday with the APA following that debrief and go practice it. And then we submit a post-action review to our commanders and they'll look through it all as well, which is where I then ended up in a service inquiry based on Lords, because the social media output was, this is cowboy, shouldn't have been done. Some commanders saw that, didn't look through the reams and reams of paperwork and planning we'd done, or the months of planning we'd done, and sort of dragged me up to attention and asked me questions. But once they knew, actually, these guys had planned it, rehearsed it, they were happy. But the post-activity review is really, really important, actually, and yeah, thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
Obviously, you guys have very experienced skydivers in your team, and I wanted to ask that, given that you guys have so many experienced people, do you guys ever consider challenging or suggesting modifications to the current airborne curriculum or airborne program?
Thank you. For those who didn't hear, we've got very experienced jumpers on the team who do some very exciting things. Do we ever consider giving our input to the airborne community about what we should change or do better? And fundamentally the answer is no. It's not our position to. We'll offer advice when we're asked, but the national governing body, is their job to do that. Sure, if they want to come and bring us onto a panel, we will offer our advice, but it's not really our job. And because we are a military team, we're all soldiers, the MOD then gets dragged into it, and if we suggest something that isn't necessarily right or goes wrong, you know, you can see how that might get played out. So yeah, we keep our cards to our chest, unless asked, but very open to helping out where we can. Brilliant, thank you very much, everyone.